see the... Oh, I'm gone. I can see the replay, and I'll get that. It's okay, I'm back. We can get interruptions like that all the time, can't we? And not just with technology. Whole of 2020 was an interruption, wasn't it? How was your 2020? Anything amazing? It's interesting to see what can go on, isn't it? That's what I want to do is just have a look back and look forward. We come to this time, the time now after Christmas, after New Year, and we're in this... Once you get past Christmas, it's an odd sort of time, isn't it? You don't really know where you are. You get up in the morning and you think, what day is it? What am I supposed to be doing? Am I going to work? Am I staying home? Do I still have visitors? I feel like a ham sandwich. It's all of those things that all come together during that time while we work out what's happening. I know personally, it was Christmas Day and then there were 2 days and then Sunday again. Sunday felt like a Wednesday for some reason. It was just weird, just a weird time. That we know. 2020, all of 2020 was this time of what are we supposed to be doing? Are we going inside? Are we staying outside? What are we supposed to do? Where are we supposed to be? What is my identity anymore? I need to find my way through life. That was 2020. It was an exhausting year because we had to learn to do everything again. Even though there was stuff we knew what we were doing, but we had to learn to do it in a new way. And everybody knows about Zoom now. I'd never heard of Zoom before last year. But now we're all experts. And people talk about, having a Zoom meeting like it was, and we all know what they mean, and it's just a crazy time. What do we do with that? What do we do with situations where things fall in a heap for us? We had plans, we had a vision, we had a direction, and everything falls in a heap. We see the church, we had to close down. These seats were empty. And I had my square metre up here that I could wander around in. That was it. But there were other things that happened, weren't there? There was the shutdown, but somehow it made some of us a little more connected. It opened up new ways of connections. It made... there was a few people... Actually, when we started, there was one person there and one person in the office. No, there were no one there. They were just in the office. And I was communicating through people in the office, and it was going out into the big wide world. Yet, what we had was feedback that we were reaching a lot of people. There were just as many people online as there had been the previous Sunday in church. But they were different people, so we're reaching new people. So that's something we learned, isn't it? That disaster may come, but it may produce something different than what we expect. And I think this is the way of God. See, there's something very serious and very clear that we need to learn as the people of God, as the children of God. Is disaster ain't disaster. Tragedy ain't tragedy. Not with God. We know we're going to come into hardship because this is the world. We know that's just what happens here. We know that's going to happen. But we also know as God's people, we know that God is going to do something with the trouble. Now, I've said before, there are 3 things, right? 3 ways that God deals with disaster, deals with trouble. 1, he can get rid of it. Okay, we experience that from time to time, don't we? Through healing. Healing is a prime example of that, where God will intervene and take away the trouble. And we'll receive a healing, the leg gets fixed, the cancer disappears, relationships are restored, all of that. It just somehow, miraculously gets fixed up. That's one way that God works. It's not the way He always works, but that's one way God works, and we should never be closed to that idea. Another way is that God gives us comfort and strength to get through the disaster, right? The disaster stays, but we get the comfort to go through it. Now that's common too. Then there's God's favourite way of dealing with things. The disaster stays, we get the comfort, but God brings something good through the disaster. That's what we call the way of the cross. That's God's favourite way of working. It's like the God of the silver lining. The cloud remains, but God inserts a silver lining into the cloud to bring us blessing through the disaster. We see the prime example of that on the cross. Jesus dying on the cross. Jesus said, "Father, if it be your will, take this cup from me, but not my will, but your will be done." So Jesus faced the disaster, and the disaster stayed. We saw what happened. He was killed. God's own son. You know, you think you got troubles. Try getting nailed to the cross. Not an easy time to go through. Jesus went through the hard time. There was even a time where all comfort was removed. My God, why have you forsaken me? Even the comfort and the strengthening from God was removed. But the greatest disaster on earth brings the greatest blessing on earth. We see the Son of God being crucified, and through that brings reconciliation between us and God. That's the way of the cross. So that's God's preferred way of working, and that's how He promises to work, that He will come to us through whatever trouble we experience, that He's there. I encourage you to look for Him in every disaster. Now, it's a thing too, is that when we're relying on ourselves and we have our plans, like last year, we all had plans. You know, we were going to do this, we were going to do that, all of these things that we could achieve last year. And then they said, stay home. And they said, you can't go anywhere. And they said, if you've been there, you have to get isolated, all of these kinds of things. If you go to the shops, you have to develop an affinity with that sanitizer. You have to know how to put on gloves and wear masks and all that kind of thing. And you've got to stay 1.5 metres apart. I think that's probably the most difficult thing. I don't think I've ever seen people properly observe 1.5 metres. I don't think they know what that is. I think we need to change it to stay 2 koala bears apart, or 2.5 koala bears, or stay 1 good black snake apart. I don't know, that kind of thing. But we have trouble with that, but we're learning, aren't we? We're growing in what it is to isolate, to separate. Through all of this strange things. Oh, that's what I was going to say. I went and distracted myself with something else, thinking about black snakes and koalas. But as we develop our own plans, our plans can get destroyed. As we follow God's plan, if that's your goal, your plan can never be disrupted. See, our own plans, something goes wrong, and we've got to come up with a whole new plan. And then we've got to make it fit into where we were trying to go. We've got to try and remember where we're going. We've got to work out whether that's the place to go anymore anyway. But if we're following God's plan, we know His plan remains. This is no surprise to God. God knew that COVID-19 was going to hit from the foundation of the world. I don't know how that even works, but God knew that this was going to happen. God foreknew. God can see what's going to happen to us next. He's got this in control. He knows how to bring good through this. So if we're following God's plans, we can move forward in faith. Some people get this confused. They say, oh, I'm following God's plan, so I'm going to continue on with my plan. No, kind of missed the point. You can't equate your plan with God's plan. Yes, we may have God's plan. I want to follow God's plan, so I will develop my plans from what I can see in line with that. So my plans have to be prepared to step out of the way when God brings a new thing into focus. But I know that God has this in control. God's got this. You know, when the Israelites left Egypt and they were walking along and they got to a place where it looked like the plan was going to come to an end. The soldiers were behind them, the water was in front of them, and they were stuck between a rock and a hard place. Well, stuck between an army and a wet place, but you know what I mean. God's path was there. There was, like it says in Psalm 77, I love that verse where it says, there was a pathway that no one could see. God had the pathway, but it was hidden for the moment until God revealed it. He said, Moses, hold out your stick, and he revealed it. You might be in the midst of a disaster. You might be having the worst day you could ever imagine. You might have soldiers behind you and a flood in front of you. God has a path that you can't see. Wait upon him. Wait for him. See what he's going to do. God's got this. Whatever happens, God can bring you through. He knows the path. He knows the way to the other side. Listen for his call. Be prepared to step out in faith. Planning's a funny thing. God has a way of reframing things. God has a way of stepping us into a new future. How do we as a church, how do we as the people of God follow him when there's no clear path? See, often what I see around is there's two ways of going about this. Well, now I've got four, but there are two ways of going about this. Okay, we can either hunker down and wait for things to get back to normal. A lot of people are doing that. You even hear it in the language, you know, when we get back, when we can do this again, when this opens up again. A lot of people are waiting for things to get back to normal, and a lot of things will, but not everything. And then the other thing you hear is, let's try and learn what the new normal will be so we can step into that. Christians are already geared up to do that. We know that God's got this. We know that God has a new normal. We know that God is always producing his way. And no matter what attacks us or what evil befalls us, we know that God can bring about a new normal. We know that God can bring about something beyond that. We know that God is already there. We know that God has the future in his hands. See, I believe 2021 can be a great time for the church. Can be a great time for our mission and a great time for our ministry. Why do I think that? Because new things are happening. When we shut down, we went online and suddenly there were more people and new people joining us online that we didn't know were there. That it started a new audience, and so we had to try and run to catch up with that. It created a new opportunity for outreach. I started hearing things like, it's never been easier to invite someone to church. I thought, oh, why is that? The reason is, all you've got to do is give people a link, and they can join us. They don't have to face all these scary people, although you're not scary, but you know, when you first come to church, you think, oh, there's all these scary people here. Well, if you just join online, there's not the scary people. Problem is there's no people because there's just you and the screen, but it's sort of a halfway step, and it's been very good. It's helped to bring peace and comfort to a lot of people throughout the nation. That's one thing that's happened. What else can happen? New things, new opportunities can open up. 2021 can be a great time for the church. Why? Well, the main reason is that God has a plan. God has a plan to make disciples of all nations. God has a plan to show his love to everybody. God has a plan to apply the cross to everyone in this world. God has a plan to bring his love to bear on the lives of everybody in this town. That's God's plan. And so whatever's happening here and whatever we're experiencing through this strange thing that's befallen the world, God can work through it, and we know that God's intention is to work through it to bring about good. I call it the Great Reset. It's like someone's pressed the reset button. I don't know if you know what a reset button is, but it's like when your computer crashes and you hold down the off button and you turn it off and you restart it and it works better. Just check out the British comedy, The IT Crowd, and they'll help you through that. It's good educational viewing. Sorry. There was a little ad there. We should run some sponsorship. But also, like it happens with electric motors, for those of you who are not into TV or computers, with an electric motor, sometimes they can get too hot and burn out and, cease to function. There's a reset button and you poke that once it cools down and it'll go again, hopefully. This is like a big reset button over the whole world. And so there's a new start. We just got to work out how that start is going to function, how that start is going to work. There's going to be some difficulties, but there's going to be some options and some, I'm hoping that it will cause, local industry to flourish. I'm hoping that we'll see new Australian industries and manufacturing begin. We have already. But I'm hoping that will grow and continue, where people will value more local things. People will value their relationships more. I think we're seeing that already, where people are thinking in terms of, well, how can I relate better to my family and friends? And that's becoming a focus rather than all the other things in their life, rather than wealth or personal achievement. There's been a shift. I'm hoping we'll see more of that. That's a result of a reset. It's not always good. Sometimes the reset can bring things crashing down around us because it's sort of like knocking the final leg out of a very weak and wobbly table. Causes things to come crashing down. But God's got that too. A good time for the church. That's why I'm saying it can be a good time for the church. 2021 can be a great time for us because it gives us an opportunity to rethink what we're doing. But also I believe that because of the disastrous events around us, God is calling the church to action, and he says that each one of you have an opportunity to feed into the goodwill of the community and the well-being of all of those around you. God says there's something here for you, and now is the time to step up. See, the Bible talks about time in two ways. I don't know if you've heard this before, but a bit of Greek. There's chronos and kairos. Have you heard of that before? Two different ways that the New Testament speaks of time. That was written in Greek. So New Testament speaks about time two different ways. There's chronos and kairos. Chronos is, a chronograph or a chronometer. But that's that. Something that tells you what time it is. Time is general. There's always chronos. It's always time, chronos, for a coffee. Okay, there's always time for a bit of caramel mud cake. That doesn't need a special time. Last Sunday was a kairos. There was a kairotic moment. The kairos happened when I got older. It was a 60th birthday. That was a kairos. And so we had that day a celebration for not only 60 years, but 120 years, because Joy jumped in as well, because she missed that kairos with hers because something called COVID came along and disabled that day. That was a kairos. That was an appointment. Now, if you come, that was a Sunday afternoon where we got together and had slices and coffee and talked about old times, and that was fantastic. But if you go to our place this afternoon, which is another Sunday afternoon, the same chronos kind of thing, but the kairos is not there. It's gone. It's past. That moment in time, that special time has gone. It's not there anymore. Chronos, kairos, two different ways. When the time had fully come, Jesus born, you've heard that? That's kairos. A time, that was a moment. That was one moment in history, and it's not coming again. I believe there's one of those for the church. I believe there's one of those for Peace Church in Gatton. There's one of those, and it's starting now. This is a kairos. This year is a kairos for us because there are going to be things that are time sensitive. Stuff is going to happen now. This year is the time to see the lost ones coming home. This year is the time to see our faith growing in our children. This year is the time, the kairos, to reach out into the community and see new people walking into our church, people who need help, people who might need a bit of comfort, people suffering a little bit. It's the kairos for that. There are people in this community who are feeling lonely, depressed, lost, sad. They need connection. This year is the kairos for that. We may miss it if we don't get on board with that. God has an appointment book, and he makes appointments with times, with places, with churches, with individuals. And there is a chance that we can miss that particular time. That's the kairos. I believe God is calling us into one of those moments. How do I know that? Well, look at everything that's happening, not just the COVID-19. The way the school is sort of revamping. We've suddenly had a turnover of staff. There are new people there. There's new opportunities, a new emphasis. There's a new emphasis in Anua. There are changes there. There's new emphasis in Peacehaven. There are changes there. It's all coming together. There's lots of arrows pointing. We've just got to work out where they're pointing. It's a kairos. It's a moment. Great things can happen. Great things will happen. And we have the opportunity now, this year, to get on board with that. Does this mean there's going to be a lot more work for me? Well, I hope not. Because if it depends on me, it's not going to work. I've got a good team of elders around me, fantastic people. If it depends on just them, it's not going to work. We could even throw the school council and church council into that. Better chance, but still not going to work. See, Jesus sent out the 12. We've probably got about 12 we could send out. Then he sent out 72. Would we have 72 people we could send out? Actually, I think we've got more. We've probably got 100, maybe a couple of hundred people that we could send out into the harvest. Is that sounding a bit scary for you? As we get on board with the mission becomes possible. As we accept the challenge of the Kairos, then we can see it materialize, we can see it become real. We can see the blessings of God start flooding in. We can see the gospel reaching out and bringing a harvest. We can see the lost ones coming home. We can do it if we do it together. The question for this year, the question that I have for this moment is, are you with me? Are you with me? Because if you're with me, we can do it. With your help, I know we can. And it won't be a job, it'll be a joy. Because together, we'll see the fruit that God has been planning for so long now. Certainly since the foundation of this church, but also from the foundation of the world. God is preparing hearts. He's preparing opportunities. He has a way, a path that no one can see right now. But as we step out in faith, as we hold up our staff, as we respond in obedience to the call of Christ, we will see the path open and we'll know where to go. If you're with me, we can do it. Let's step into this year with hope. Let's step into this year in obedience to the call of Christ. Let's step into this year taking up the challenge of the Kairos, knowing that God is with us and knowing that He can and will work through us. May God's peace be with you as you step into this year. Whatever hardship He throws up at you, remember God is the God of the silver lining and can bring hope and joy and reconciliation to your moment. Whatever challenge God throws up at you, seek His face. Seek His face and see where He's calling you. And may that peace of God, may that rest over you. And may it keep your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus, aligned with His will, called into His work, and blessed by His love. Amen.